guys, and welcome to the Aberrant Design Co. workshop. My name is David Troutman. Nice to meet you guys. I'm going to be going over some tips and tricks for turning an acrylic pin this evening. We are going with a Persian blue blank from Woodcraft. It was $4.99 for the kit, and I used the, you can see it. That's the piece we're going to make tonight. And I use the Legacy Slimline kits for these little slimlines. They are on Amazon and they are relatively inexpensive. So if you don't have a ton of money and you're looking to get into some pin turning and you want to try some acrylics, these will be some useful tips and tricks for you. And let's get started. Thanks a lot, guys. Safety first. Alrighty, so if you're here and you're watching, I'm going to assume this is not your first pin. You've got the basics down pat at this point. We are just going to go over some specific tips and tricks that are strictly for acrylics, except for the first one, which is when you first start to make your blank and you cut up the pieces, you want to draw a line in the middle before you cut the two large sections in half. On one side, just draw a nice big thick visible line on one side so it's really easy to find the proper orientation again when you go to put it back together, because if it's a tight grained wood that doesn't have a lot of variation in how it looks, you can get yourself into some trouble trying to figure out which direction the thing was supposed to go. So the best thing for it is to draw that line before you cut it. That way you can go right back to it when you go to put it together. Simple, easy, will save you a lot of time in the long run. So let's go ahead and chuck this baby up. What you want to do is take a look all around your piece and figure out what you think is going to be the best looking section. I'm thinking I'm going to go with this. I'm going to use that for the tip of the pin. So I'll set that there. Alrighty, so once you've gotten this onto the lathe, you got your bushing, you're ready to go. This lathe has a locking mechanism. I like to lock that down when I want to tighten my knurled nut here. I try to keep these lined up as well as possible so I can kind of see what it's going to look like when we finish it up here. If you don't have a mandrel saver like I don't have, be careful while you're locking that in on the tailstock so you don't bend your mandrel. There we go. Okay, so a couple starting points here. Important things I wanted to discuss. When I work with solid acrylics, not hybrids, but solid acrylics, especially the hard, brittle ones, not nice alumilites, but like the kind they use with Woodcraft's pieces, is a kind of hard, sort of brittle type of acrylic, and it's very finicky. So if you want to keep it alive and have an easier time turning it, always turn solid acrylics with your carbide tools. I've seen a lot of folks saying you have to have your carbide perfectly level all the time. I don't follow that piece of information at all. That doesn't seem to be what works the best for me. I use whatever angle makes the best cut while it's turning. For all of my pins, I turn them at 2600 RPMs. I believe it is 2670 RPMs. I'm going to start roughing this with the round cutter from Easy Wood Tools, and we're going to see what we can do with this thing. Alright guys, thanks for watching. about totally round here. And let me see if I can zoom this in. As I'm sure you can see, I'm not being extremely gentle with this tool. But because it's that carbide, it puts a pretty dang smooth finish on this acrylic. There's none of that pitting that you see a lot of times when people are working with acrylics with high-speed steel. It's very, very smooth even while you're being pretty aggressive with the tool. So this is why I use the carbide for my acrylics, because it makes a much smoother finish with a lot less effort, and you can go a lot faster and get more done if you are working with the carbide on this acrylic. Alright, so that's where we're at so far. Let me crank this back up and keep on trucking here. Just a second, let me sit you guys back down. Back at it again with the round tip cutter. Easy wood tools. There we go. Now you can hear that we are fully round at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and rough out the front half of this really quick, and then we'll go on from there. Alright, thanks guys. Alright guys, welcome back. We are down to round on both pieces of this now, and now that we're got it down to round and I'm looking at it, what I had originally intended on being the back section, I'm not going to make the front section because it has a lot more interesting characteristics going on with it. So we're going to use this for the front now and this for the back, which doesn't change anything, just the direction you're going to end up with your slopes going. I'm not a straight line, slim line person. That's not how I roll, so I know that's a little controversial sometimes with folks, but hey, you're watching my video today, so it's going to be with a little bit of spunk to it for the slim line. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and go here. We're going to go front back now instead of front back. Still using the round carbide cutter to rough down our shapes. I'm going to go to the bushing over here, taper it back up to about 2/3, come back to the bushing. This one I'm going to go to the bushing, and make the taper about half. That is a lovely little piece of acrylic. We're going to keep pulling down here, come to these bushings, and decide how thick we want our overall piece to be. So we're leaving a little extra material here. Come to the bushing, decide from there, make your curvature if you're making one, which I am today, and then go from there. Now we're just creeping up on our bushings and our shape. And I told you at the beginning, a lie, that I only use carbide on my acrylics. I only use carbide to rough down my acrylics. I use high-speed steel to finalize my curvatures and to come down to the bushing. I got a, I don't know, 1/2 inch, 0.625 something, skew. I use the skew here to clear off that little bit of excess and finish out my shape, smooth out my surfaces, anything, because you know a round cutter is only touching with a small little point all the time, so it'll leave a little bit of a bumpy surface along. Just use your flat skew, smooth it all down, come down to your bushings, and finish it up. You're not taking off a lot of material, you're just smoothing out the final finish. Go. We are down. I left just a teeny bit, maybe 10 thousandths or something like that, on top of the bushings on either side. So when you're sanding, I'm not gonna kill the piece and come in too tight with the sanding. So what we got here, finished section, nice and smooth, straight off the tool. So when we go to hit this with the sanding materials, we're going to start with like a 320. We don't need to do anything more aggressive than that. This is already, honestly, we could start at a 400 if we really wanted to. But this has got a pretty smooth finish already. It's got a good shape. I might trim it down just a little bit further so it's not super fat, so nobody yells at me on all the blogs and all the pages and the Facebooks and whatever. But that is the basic style we were going for. Working out pretty good. Alright, back at it again one more time just to trim this down just a little bit further with the 1/2 inch skew. Just a little bit of a lip. Don't want to go too close to that bushing because we're still going to do some sanding with some pretty aggressive grits. We don't want to be so close to it that we can't keep up. Like I was saying, we don't want to come down so on top of the bushing with just a tool that we run out of room to sand and then we get in trouble. So that's going to be the front half. Go ahead and knock out the back half and we'll talk some more. Generally speaking, it won't kill you to pull that stuff off while it's spinning. It's not going to grab you, more than likely. But for the sake of safety and not giving poor advice, cut your lathe off when you're going to pull off those little pieces so that it doesn't grab your hand. Rip it in here, cut your hand off, and now you've got one hand to turn with, and that's a lot more difficult. Alrighty, once again, we are good with the carbide. We roughed it down pretty quickly. Again, not being super duper cautious because with the carbide you don't have to be quite so touchy with it. It's not going to blow up in your face so easily the same way a lot of things do when you're turning acrylic with high-speed steel. So Again, that's why we use this carbide to rough it down. Makes it easier for you. You can do it in, around about the same time that you could do a wood pin. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this down right up next to these bushings here, and then we will start finishing this guy out. There we go. Again, pretty nice and smooth finish on this carbide right off the tool. I mean, it feels like it's already sanded to 4, maybe 600 grit right off the tool. So that's the way to do it if you got to. I'm going to trim this down a little bit further now to match the diameter of this guy, so they'll look hunky-dory together, and we'll go from there. There we go. Alrighty, we are down where we want to be with this guy. We're right up on the bushings, leaving just a couple thousandths, maybe 10 thousandths to trim off. Like I said, I like a little meat on my slim lines. I know I'm weird, I apologize, but I'm not sorry. So that's where we're at. Alright, let me put these guys down, and I will get us started on some sanding and finishing. Alright everybody, we are here with our sanding materials and our wet sanding materials to finish this thing out. I use these blue soft-backed sanding pads, little sections from Festool. They sell these at Woodcraft by a square that's twice this big. I cut them in half. And they're foam backed. I use 320, 400, 600, and 800, and they do a phenomenal job of sanding down these blanks, and they last longer than any other standard kind of sanding paper that I've ever worked with. They last a lot longer, they work a lot better, they do not gum up with almost any material ever. These are, one piece will last you maybe 10 or 15 pins, one little half sheet, and per sheet at Woodcraft, each little sheet of these is 50 cents. So I've got maybe $2 here, but I only used half of each, so I really only have $1 here, and these will last me 10 or 15 pins, which is a lot cheaper than Abernet or whatever else you want to use to work with. So the blue Festool foam backed paper, it sits at the back of Woodcraft in little boxes, and you tear it off sheet by sheet. Okie doke, I'm going to start with the 320 and we'll go from there. Alrighty, knocked out with a 320. Let's keep rolling. Go to 400 next. As with wet sanding, with dry sanding, your very first grit, you want to knock down all of the texture on the surface that you can find and get rid of it completely. From then on, your following grits, their only job, see, anything that's dusty in there, just brushes right out, never gums up. After you finish with your first grit and it's all down to an even consistency all around where you want it, the rest of the grits, their only job is to remove the sanding scratches from the previous grit. So if you're getting done with your first grit and it's still kind of lumpy from the tool, you're not done with your first grit yet. Get it back out. Don't move on to the next one. always the following grits are strictly for removing scratches from the first grit. The foam backing on this stuff is great because it keeps you from putting too much pressure in one area. Since you're using kind of your finger, you got a pressure point. The foam actually spreads the force out across a bigger area, so you're less likely to push in and go too far in one area or make an unsmooth surface because you pushed not uniformly across the surface. So good stuff for the foam back. On to 600 now. Alrighty, there we go. We are down to 800 grit. We are very smooth at this point, but we are going to go ahead and micro mesh this guy down to 12,000, and we'll see where we can go from there. Alright, this is where we're at, down to 800, nice and smooth, nice and down to the bushings, pretty good. So, we're getting there. When you go to wet sand, always make sure to cover your lathe bed with something to keep the water out. I gotta cover my other tools to keep the water out. I got 11 different grits here. They are color coordinated to tell you which one goes next. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and run through these real quick and we will be pretty much finished. When I do my wet sanding, I keep 2 fingers on top of my piece. They can feel when you've gotten sanded down to as smooth as your finish is going to get from this particular grit, and then you move on to the next one. That way you'll always know. You're not going, I hope I'm done now. And that'll also help you from, this is acrylic already, so it's not going to need a CA finish, but it'll keep you, when you're working with wood with a CA finish, from burning through it so much. Alright guys, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and polish this guy up. This is where we got to by wet sanding to 12,000 with our micro mesh. And I'm going to use the Hut Ultra Gloss plastic polish to go ahead and finish this guy off. All you got to do with this stuff is put a couple of drops on your towel here, and you just rub it on there with it running. Leave it the same speed, 2670, and go ahead. There you have it guys, one quick polish and we are glass smooth. Looking good. I'm going to shut you guys down real quick so I have enough space left to show you the final product. Alright, thanks. Alrighty everybody, here is our finished Persian blue acrylic pen. That's what we've got. You can see the flake in it. Nice and sparkly. And again, this is my chunky slimline style. I know it's not everybody's favorite thing in the world, but we're more talking technique than aesthetics here. So you can see how nice and shiny and smooth the finish is. So that's really the goal here, is to work on the technique, and then you make your shapes how you like them. Alright everybody, thanks for watching. Have a good night.